Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Now in this video, my husband Handy Andy and I will be showing you how we made this beautiful backdrop for our baby's gender reveal. And we made this for about $200 in comparison to the $550 we were quoted. Yes, and that was to rent, guys, not to buy, just to rent. Now this backdrop we made is not only sturdy enough for windy events, but it's also super easy to break down and set up with foldable legs. And it's honestly customizable to any kind of event, which is also perfect for us because we plan to repurpose this for our baby shower. Now, if this all sounds good to you, let's get into it. Like any good DIY, we're starting off at Home Depot to pick up the materials for our backdrop. And there's our guy with our cart, getting our wood. Everyone keeps calling Andy. Everyone needs Handy Andy. So we're having trouble focusing on this one project. So for our backdrop, we knew that we wanted something with a smooth finish so that it was nice and paintable, but we also needed something really nice and sturdy that could withstand any outdoor wind since our gender reveal was outdoors. So we decided to go with this 1/2-inch thick sand plywood. They were each priced at $50, so we picked up 3 sheets for each of our 3 panels. And for the legs, we are taking 2 sheets of this regular plywood. They're each 3/4 of an inch thick and 2 by 4 feet long. Now it's time to head out and get to work. Now I did want to mention that we used some additional supplies for this project that I will talk more about as we continue to go through the video, but I'll also be listing all the supplies for this project below in the description for you as well. Now I love to start every project with a nice vision, so I'm just going to show you what I started with. For this backdrop, we wanted the middle panel to be larger than the left and the right side, as you can see here, to really create that nice focal point in the center. We also needed to make sure that the middle panel was big enough to put the closet right in the front for the gender reveal, and we knew our closet was 73 inches, so we figured that our largest panel would probably end up being about 2 feet taller, and our smaller panels would probably be about a foot shorter than the middle panel. So now it's time to make our sketch come to life. We're going to start off by measuring and sketching the sides of our closet onto the back of one of the sheets of plywood so we can really visualize how it's going to look on the panel. Once we sketched the closet, we realized we wanted to use the full height of the board for our middle panel. So next, it was time to create the outline for the arch of the board. To get a perfect arch, we drew a line going perfectly down the center of the board, and then we marked a spot on that line 24 inches from the top of the board. From here, we're going to use a scrap piece of wood to basically make a giant protractor to help us make our arch. So we're going to drill a hole at the end and the center of this piece of wood, and we're making sure that each hole is 24 inches apart from one another. Now, 24 inches is half the diameter of the board, since I know my board is a total of 48 inches wide, which is how we got this measurement. Next, we're going to use the middle hole on the scrap piece of wood to screw the wood onto the board at our 24-inch mark. But we're going to drill the nail only halfway into the board so we can easily rotate the piece of wood on the other side just like this. That's awesome, babe. That's really cool. And to finish off our little protractor creation, we're going to make the hole on the other end a little bit wider because from here we're going to put a permanent marker into the hole so we can begin drawing our arch all the way around the board. Now here you can see the first hole we made, and you can see that the second wider hole, we actually didn't take it all the way through the board. That's just so we could fit the specific shaped marker that we're using for this. And here I'm just testing it to make sure it's the perfect size.
Your finger?
Oh, okay, we got it. Feel free to, of course, adjust your hole to whatever marker or pencil you'll be using. We found that a simple marker was the smoothest and easiest. Oh yeah, that looks super good, babe.
Crispy.
That is awesome. This gave us such a perfect arch, and it was so easy to make, and we'll continue to use the same protractor for all the rest of our arches. And now that we have our outline, we're going to screw out our protractor and get to cutting. Now for this panel, we'll be using a jigsaw to cut out the arch, since that's the only cutting we'll need to do for this panel. And it looks so great. So to finish off this panel, we're going to use an orbital sander to sand the edges. We definitely recommend sanding the sides first and then sanding the top after, so that you can utilize those markings we made for the arch to avoid sanding too far into the board. After we've sanded the sides, we're sanding those top markings away as well until nice and smooth, and then we're going to use a sanding block for any edges that need a little bit more love. And that's it. Our middle panel is complete. So that is the front. This is the back. Next, it's time to outline and cut out our two side panels. These two panels will be the exact same size, so after we make this one, we'll follow the same process for the last one. Now we want this panel to be smaller altogether, so we're starting off by measuring the panel to 36 inches wide, so we're removing a total of 12 inches off the width. And to make sure our line is straight, we're marking 12 inches of width from the top to the bottom of the board, and we're using our protractor to connect the markings to make a perfect line. We're also using these square edge clamps to keep things in place while we're measuring. These are always so helpful when you're doing any kind of woodwork. Next, we're going to create the outline for our arch. But since this board is 12 inches smaller in width, we made another hole in our protractor that is 6 inches shorter to match the size of the board. And we're jumping in with the same marker, so off we go.
Cool, huh?
That felt good, it did. And once again, we have a perfect arch. I'm telling you, I love this thing, guys. But now it's time to cut it out, so we're going to be using a circular saw for the straight cut and the jigsaw again for the round arch. And our second panel is complete, so we're going to follow the same steps for our third panel, cutting the width of our last board to 36 inches as well, and creating our arch about 6 inches shorter than we did the middle panel. We honestly decided to leave a little extra height on each of our side panels so that we could see all the panels together once they were all cut, and then we could decide if we wanted to go back and cut them shorter. But as you know, once they're too short, you can't go back. So if you're not too sure of how much to cut, try not to cut too much right away. Now we're going to sand this panel just like we did the others. And there we have it, our 3 panels. So we love how this looks, but we're thinking that we do want to make it just a tad a bit shorter on the left and right side. So we're going to cut it about 3 inches so that we can give it a little bit more of a differentiation in height. So from here, we're just measuring it across the board to make sure that we get a perfect line, and then we're going to cut it right out. Now, of course, we're just starting with 3 inches because the height is definitely one of those things you want to cut off little by little. But if we find that in the end we do want it a little bit shorter, we can always go back and cut it again. And that is so much better. So now it's time to start building the legs of each panel. For this, the plan is to create 2 triangular legs just like this that would hold up the panels. And we'd also add a crossbar across each of the legs to hold it in place. So let's get to it. We're starting off with this 2x4 sheet of basic plywood that is 3/4 inch thick that we picked up at HomeDepot, and we're going to measure and cut out 2 even-sized triangles that each measure out to 24 inches. Now this is going to be the size for the legs for our large middle panel, and we'll talk more about the legs for our smaller side panels later. From here, we're going to cut out the triangles using our circular saw since these are all straight cuts we're doing. And there we have it, perfect legs. So to further complete them, and this is truly just personal preference, but we're going to cut the edges off 2 of the corners to square them off so they look just like this. Next up, we're going to cut out small notches midway on each of the legs, and this is going to help keep our crossbar in place later on. We're going to make each notch about 1 inch wide and about 2 inches deep. But if you can tell, Annie's kind of eyeballing it because it doesn't have to be perfect. The goal is just to make sure that you can fit your crossbar into the notches later on. Now to quicken the process, we're going to cut them together using our clamps to keep them in place. We're using our jigsaw for this, and this is what it'll look like. So we're just going to give this a nice little sand and they're good to go. Next, we're grabbing our leftover plywood from the panels to cut out 4 small wooden squares. We're cutting these about 3.5 by 3.5 inches, and these are going to help secure the hinges on our legs later on. We're going to place 2 on each leg, which is why we'll need a total of 4 of them. Now it's officially time to add our legs to our panel, so we drew 2 lines on each side of the board, a 1/2 inch apart from each other, to mark as a guide for our legs and our hinges. Now we made our first line 7 inches in on each side, and the second line about 3/4 of an inch further in. We're also going to dry fit each leg and mark the top of where each leg starts. Next, we're going to place our wooden squares along this inner line we drew earlier and mark their placement just in case they move. And that's perfect, so now we can pre-drill and screw them onto the board. We place each of these squares about 4 inches from the bottom and about 4 inches from the top of the leg, but this doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to place them somewhat evenly. And now we can attach our legs. So we're going to put our leg back in place using the marking and the outline that we made. And these are the hinges we'll be using. So we're going to place those just like this and mark the area where we're going to screw them into. These markings will make it really easy for you to be able to pre-drill where all the screws are going into. So we're going to pre-drill all the areas and place our screws, and that's it. Now I know pre-drilling can seem like an unnecessary step or just like a chore overall, but it actually makes it so much easier to screw, and it can also prevent your wood from splitting, which is super important. And there we have it. We're going to follow the same process on the other leg. And our legs are good to go. I'm so obsessed with how these legs came out. They're so sturdy and just so easy to open and close, which is so great when you're setting up and breaking down. And it also makes it a lot easier to store as well. Now to keep our legs in place when they're holding the panel, we're grabbing a 1x4 inch strip board and cutting it to about 2 to 3 inches longer than the width of the legs on each side. You want it to be just long enough to pass the legs, but shorter than the width of the panel so it can't be seen from the front. We're also going to cut small notches on each end to seamlessly attach them to the legs. So here we're just using a pencil to outline the notch of the leg onto the board so we know exactly what we need to cut out. It helps to kind of create all of your markings while you actually have the crossbar in, and then we'll remove it, straighten out any markings, and cut it out with a jigsaw. And we're also giving this a light sanding just so it's nice and smooth. Creating notches on both the legs and the crossbar really helped to reinforce the sturdiness of the panel. And there you have it. Looking good. Amazing. Now for our 2 side panels, we follow the same process, but instead we cut our legs down to about 18 inches each. We squared the edges and sanded them down just like the large panel. And cut notches on each of them for our crossbar. And then we cut the same size wooden squares as well. When it came to screwing on the legs, we placed the legs about 4 inches inside on each side and placed our squares and hinges about 3/4 of an inch inside that. The whole reason why we're placing the squares 3/4 of an inch inside the leg is because the leg itself is 3/4 of an inch thick. And we are of course pre-drilling before we put in any of our screws, using the same hinges that we used for the larger panel. And there you have it, another beautiful, sturdy backdrop. To perfectly secure these boards, we made a crossbar for each of our 2 panels, just like our middle panel. Now, if you're doing both of your side panels the same size like we did, keep in mind that you can of course just use all the same measurements for this crossbar as the other. Good to go. And that concludes a full day's work, so we're gonna hit the sack and get to painting tomorrow. Babe, you killed it. Man, it looks so awesome, I can't get over it. Alright guys, our backdrops are complete, so it is time to get painting. We're starting off by giving each panel a light sanding with our sanding block. And then we're going to pull out a brush and just brush off any loose debris that might be on the panels. For the paint job, we're going to prime our two side panels with some all-purpose primer. And we're going to give this 2 coats to make sure that it's nice and solid. So now we basically have a clean slate to paint on top of. And for the middle panel, we're going to prime it with a specific mineral prime for Limewash paint. This type of primer is essential for a beautiful Limewash effect, which is exactly what I'm trying to create here. I've honestly been so into Limewash these past 2 years, and it adds such a cozy vibe. I actually have a whole video dedicated to Limewash paint in case you want to learn a little bit more about this, so I'll definitely make sure to link it up above here. Now overall for this paint job, I really want to create something neutral since this is for our gender reveal. So for the side panels, we're going to be using this Bare Swiss Coffee, which is such a great warm white. It's actually the color that we have throughout our home, and I think it's just the perfect white if you're looking for just a little pinch of warmth. And from here, I'm just going to repeat the same process on the other side panel. And now it's time to Limewash, so I'm using some leftover paint from my last Limewash paint project. It's a beautiful grayish beige that is just going to be the right amount of color to make our closet stand out on this backdrop. I'm also applying this with a block brush, which is what really creates that beautiful textured look that you get with Limewash. Now I'm gonna let that dry overnight, and then I'm gonna jump back in with another coat of the Limewash paint, but this time I'm only gonna be using half paint, half water. So this is really gonna water down that paint and help create that Limewash effect with my block brush. Once again, if you're interested in doing this technique, I highly encourage you to watch that Limewash video just so you know exactly how this works. It's honestly so easy and comes out so beautiful and is so worth it. All right, officially a day and a half, right? 2 days. 2 days away from the gender reveal, and we are finalizing this backdrop. Our house is a complete mess, but the backdrop is on its way. Starting to look really cute. I think that looks good, and then we have some clothes for the right side. And then we need to add some like dried florals there. We actually took our kitchen knobs out to put these knobs here. LOL. This is just an IKEA dresser. Andy actually added this piece right here because we found that when the dresser was closed, you were actually able to peek inside. So he just added that little piece, and then now you can't see anything at all, so we won't have any peekers, including this one, because he's always trying to find out what the gender is, even though he swears it's a boy already, but we'll see.
No need to peek when you already know.
And it's coming together. And for the finishing touches, we're adding some removable vinyl lettering that I designed on my Cricut. I have my best friend here helping me with it, and this is how it came out. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was super helpful to you and just helps you save money in making a beautiful backdrop for whatever event you might be doing this for. Also, if you'd like to know if we're having a boy or a girl, make sure to watch the next video. We have a whole video of our gender reveal. Last but not least, don't forget to subscribe if this video was helpful to you. It makes such a difference to this channel. And with that said, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!